There is a face in the trees. It is the first thing you see in the recording. Dark, hair-covered, framed almost perfectly between two trunks in a stretch of southern Appalachian forest. The eyes are open, they are fixed on the camera, and across every second of the footage they do not blink. This is not a shape in the fog. It is not a trick of a branch and a shadow. A married couple says this is what was standing in the woods, watching them, on a remote trail they had never taken before. And before they backed away, they got it on their phone. They told us the way it held that stare wasn't curiosity, it wasn't fear, it was the stillness of something that had already decided not to lose sight of them. It just stood there and watched, long seconds. They stared back, neither side moved. And here's the part that gets under my skin, the part I keep coming back to. Before they ever saw it, the forest had gone completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. That dead air that witnesses have been describing for 100 years right before one of these encounters.
I'm Alex, and I have read hundreds of these reports. The silence and then the stillness of the forest around you is the pattern that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Because the silence isn't the absence of the story. The silence, usually, is an apex predator announcing itself.
The people who filmed this were not thrill seekers. They were an ordinary hiking couple, experienced enough to know the one thing you do not do when something is watching you in the woods. You do not run, so they didn't. They walked, slowly, deliberately, while something they never once heard followed them all the way out. And that's the first mystery. If it followed them through thick brush without snapping a single twig, what kind of animal moves like that? But there is a second mystery, and it might be bigger because this is not the only thing filmed in these mountains. There's other footage of what looks like the same kind of creature that did the exact opposite. It ran. One stood its ground and stared like a hunter. One fled like prey. Same mountains. Why?
Two pieces of footage, two faces, two completely opposite reactions, and one stretch of old, silent forest that has been swallowing people for over half a century. But to understand what these two pieces of footage might be showing us, we have to go back to the trail and to the wrong turn that started all of this.
Before I go any further, I owe you the truth about where this came from, because the trust on this channel matters more to me than any single video. This came to us from a viewer, an email, a recording, and a story. We were not there. We cannot independently verify that the footage is genuine, and I am not going to stand here and pretend we can. What I can tell you is that we are giving these people the benefit of the doubt, laying out exactly what they sent us and exactly what they said, and letting you be the judge. You always are. I say that at the start of a video like this every time, and I am never going to stop, because the moment a channel like this one starts dressing up maybes as definitelys, it is over. It has become exactly the thing the skeptics already think we are. So here is my promise to you, the same as always. Where I know something, I will tell you I know it. Where I am guessing, I will tell you I am guessing. And where I have no idea, which on this subject is often, I will look you in the eye and say so. The mystery is interesting enough on its own. It does not need me to lie to it. With that said, let me tell you about the couple. They are a husband and wife, regular hikers, the kind who spend most good weekends somewhere with dirt under their boots. They know the southern Appalachians of western North Carolina the way some people know their own neighborhood, the country around the Great Smokies and the Nantahala backcountry, ridgelines and laurel thickets and creeks the color of strong tea. They had a usual route, the trail they always took, the one they knew turn for turn. But that day, for no reason either of them could fully explain afterward, they decided to take something more remote, a fainter path, branching off and away from the route everyone else uses, pushing deeper into a part of the forest they had never walked. And I personally think that detail is the one people underestimate. Because almost every account like this, the ones that end with something staring back, starts the exact same way. Somebody leaves the trail everybody else is on. Somebody takes the route they never take. It is like the encounters live in the gaps, in the quiet seams of the map where almost no one ever goes. Think about what a maintained trail actually is. It is a thin ribbon of human noise running through a landscape that is otherwise enormous and empty. Boots, voices, dogs, the rattle of trekking poles day after day, year after year. Anything that wants nothing to do with people learns the trail the way a deer learns a highway. It learns where the people are. And it learns just as surely where they are not. So when you step off that ribbon and onto a fainter path, one that sees a handful of boots a year instead of 1,000, you are not just changing your route. You are crossing out of the part of the forest that has been taught to expect humans and into the part that hasn't. You're walking into territory that for all practical purposes belongs to whatever lives there. They didn't know any of that in the moment. They just knew the new path was prettier, wilder, quieter. They knew it climbed away from the noise and into old timber, big trees, the kind of cathedral hush. That is exactly why people fall in love with these mountains in the first place. They were enjoying themselves. That is the part that always gets me. These things never begin with dread. They begin with a good day. They didn't know it yet, but they had just walked into one of those seams. It came on gradually, and then all at once. Roughly 10 minutes past the turn, the wife noticed it first. The woods had gone quiet, not peaceful quiet, not the soft hush of a calm afternoon. Quiet like a held breath. The birdsong that had been with them all morning had simply stopped. No insects droning, no small things rustling in the leaf litter. Just their own footsteps, suddenly far too loud. And then the feeling, that one everybody who has spent real time in the woods knows and nobody can quite explain. The feeling of being watched, arriving in the gut, a long moment before the eyes have anything to go on. Here is what I want you to understand about that silence, because it is not just atmosphere. It is one of the single most consistent details in the entire body of encounter reports. Over and over, witnesses describe the forest switching off right before something happens. The animals know first. The birds, the squirrels, the insects. They go still and silent when an apex presence moves into the area. The same way a watering hole empties when a big cat comes down to drink. And there's nothing supernatural about that part. It is just biology. Prey animals survive by reading the room, and the room they read is mostly sound. A songbird's whole life depends on knowing instantly when a predator has entered its airspace. So when the woods go quiet, it is not nothing, it is information. It is 100 small animals all making the same calculation at the same time, and the calculation is be still, be silent. Do not draw the eye of the thing that just arrived, which means the silence the couple walked into was not the woods relaxing. It was the woods bracing. Every living thing around them had already registered something they themselves could not yet see. The couple were, in a very real sense, the last ones in that forest to find out they were not alone. The couple wasn't thinking about any of that in the moment, of course. They just felt the wrongness of it. The wife said later it was like the volume of the whole world had been turned down, and she couldn't figure out who was holding the dial. And it is worth saying plainly that this exact detail, the dead air, the sudden hush, shows up in case after case that has nothing to do with each other. Different decades, different states, different witnesses who never met and never compared notes, people reaching independently for the same handful of words. The birds stopped, it got too quiet, the woods went dead. When the same strange detail surfaces from people who could not have copied it from one another, I pay attention. Coincidence has a shape, and this isn't it.
And so many of you have left comments describing this exact thing. The woods going dead, the volume dropping, the animals vanishing right before the moment everything changed. Keep leaving those comments, because the pattern is too consistent to be a coincidence. And reading them is part of how I keep learning what this is. But the single most reported warning sign in these encounters isn't a sound, it's the absence of a sound. The forest goes silent first, and then you see it.
They almost walked right past it. It was the husband who stopped. Something in the corner of his eye, a shape that was the wrong shape, a stillness in the brush that was too deliberate to be brush. He put a hand on his wife's arm, and they both looked. And there it was, watching them from a distance, partly screened by trunks and a tangle of foliage, far enough up the slope that they could not make out every detail. But far is not the same as hidden. They could see it. They could see the dark mass of it. And most of all, they could see the face, and the face was looking directly back at them. That is when the husband fumbled out his phone and started recording. The footage is what you would expect from a man whose hands are shaking, zoomed in hard, jittering, the autofocus hunting in and out. But through all of it, the face stays there. It does not duck away. It does not break and run. It just keeps watching. And the eyes, they told us that across the entire time they stood there, locked onto it, it did not appear to blink. Not once. I want to be careful here and tell you only what they described, which was not some catalog of features at that distance, but an effect. The effect of being looked at by something that was not going to look away first. The feeling of being pinned in place, of being measured. The wife said it didn't feel like an animal noticing them. It felt like an animal that had already been watching them for who knows how long, finally letting them catch up to the fact. Like a hunter that has its quarry in sight and is simply deciding what to do next. And, she said, almost afraid to look away, afraid to lose them. I want to sit on that last part because I think it is the most important thing either of them told us. There are two very different ways a wild thing looks at you. One is the look of a creature that has just been startled, that did not know you were there, all wide-eyed alarm and the muscles already coiling to flee. We have all seen that look on a deer. The other is the look of a creature that knew exactly where you were the whole time, that has been holding still and watching and is now simply waiting to see what you will do. That second look is the one that empties the blood out of your hands, and that, they said, was the look they got. And here's a small thing that I cannot stop turning over. Why didn't it run? Set aside what it was for a second. Almost everything large and wild in those mountains, a bear, a boar, a big cat, will break and leave the instant it realizes a human has locked eyes with it. That is the default. That is survival. The animals that are still alive in a world full of armed people are, overwhelmingly, the animals that flee. So a thing that does not flee, that stands in the open and holds your gaze and makes you be the one to leave, is either too confident to be afraid of you or curious enough about you to override its fear. Neither of those is comforting. Both of them suggest a mind doing something more than reacting. I have said it before on this channel, and I will say it again. The eyes are the thing. The eyes are what separate a maybe it was a bear story from the handful of accounts that genuinely keep me up at night. A bear glances at you and goes back to what it was doing, or it leaves. A bear does not hold an unbroken, unblinking stare across a clearing like it is reading you. Whatever was up, that slope was doing something a bear does not do. There's a sound on the recording from the voice of the wife saying, "Please, let's get out of here." That is the moment for me that the whole thing stops being a blurry shape and starts being real. Because here is the thing about fear. You can fake a dark figure in the trees, you can throw on a costume, you can edit a clip, you can stage a shape at the edge of the frame. People do it all the time. But the involuntary fear in a person's voice, the way it cracks and drops and goes quiet when something has genuinely frightened them, that is much, much harder to perform. And there is something in the way she says it that I find very hard to listen to and write off. It is not theatrical. It is not for the camera. It is a woman quietly asking her husband to please get her away from whatever is looking at them. And notice what they did not do. They did not scream. They did not bolt. Both of them understood, the way experienced outdoors people do, that running is the worst possible move. Running tells a predator that you're prey. Running triggers the chase. So instead, against every animal instinct firing in their bodies, they made themselves do the hardest thing. They turned slowly and they walked. If you have never been in that position, it is almost impossible to describe how much that takes. Every system in your body is screaming at you to run. Your legs are flooded with the chemistry to do it. The whole ancient machinery of your nervous system, built over millions of years, is shouting one word, and the word is go. And you have to override all of it with the thin, cold voice of reason that says, if you run, you die. You have to walk away from the most frightening thing you have ever seen at the pace of a Sunday stroll, because your higher brain knows something your body refuses to accept. They did it, both of them. And the fact that they kept their heads, that they did the textbook correct, profoundly unnatural thing, is one of the reasons I tend to believe the rest of what they say. People who are making up a story for attention tend to make themselves the hero of a dramatic chase. People telling the truth about real fear tend to describe doing something small and sensible and quietly terrifying, like walking when they wanted to run. This is the part of their account that I cannot stop thinking about. Not the face, not the stare, this. They walked out nervous, fast but controlled, glancing back over their shoulders toward the slope where it had been standing. And as they walked, both of them became certain of something. They were being followed, not because they heard it, because they didn't. And that is the horror of it. Think about where they were. A thick, mature Appalachian forest. Deep leaf litter, dry sticks, dense understory. The kind of ground where the two of them could not take 3 steps without crunching and snapping, where their own progress sounded to their ears like an elephant crashing through. In a forest like that, anything that moves makes noise. That is just physics. That is just the woods. And yet, behind them, there was nothing. No footfall, no branch, no rustle of leaves being pushed aside. Total silence. But the feeling, the certainty, the prickle on the back of the neck never let up. They were sure, both of them separately, that something was pacing them through the trees. So sit with the 2 possibilities because both of them are unsettling. Maybe they imagined it. Maybe the fear from the stare just rode them all the way back to the car and nothing followed them at all. That is possible, and I will not pretend it isn't. Or maybe they were right. And if they were right, then whatever it was is a master of moving in complete silence through terrain that should make silence impossible. Something large enough to leave a face like that in the trees, moving through dry brush without disturbing a single leaf. That is not how a bear moves. That is not how a deer moves. That is not how a person moves. I genuinely do not know what moves like that. And it is worth dwelling on just how hard that is because we tend to underestimate it. Go out into a dry autumn forest sometime and try to move 20 feet in total silence. You can't. I can't. Trained hunters in soft boots, moving inch by inch, taking a full minute to cross a small clearing, still snap the occasional twig. Now scale that up. Picture something that might weigh 400, 500, 600 pounds, moving at the speed of 2 walking adults through that same crackling understory and making no more sound than a held breath. The strength to stealth ratio of that is almost incomprehensible. It would require not just size, but an intimate, bodily knowledge of the ground, where the soft moss is, where the bare rock is, where to place a foot so the leaves don't speak. The kind of knowledge you only get from a lifetime spent in one stretch of forest, learning it the way you learn the floorboards of your own house in the dark. And that, more than the face, more than the stare, is the thing that tips me toward believing something real was there. Because that is not a detail a person making up a story would invent. A liar gives you crashing branches and pounding footsteps and a monster roaring through the woods because that is what's scary in the movies. The couple gave us the opposite. They gave us nothing. Silence. And silence, done that well by something that big, is so much worse. And I personally think the silence is scarier than the sighting. A thing you can see is a thing you can track, a thing you can point at and name and watch. But a thing that follows you and makes no sound at all is something else entirely. It means it has chosen to be unseen. It means the only reason you ever saw its face in the first place is that, for a few seconds, it let you. And it means that on every other hike, in every other quiet stretch of woods you have ever walked and felt perfectly alone, you have only ever had its word for it that you were.
In a forest where they couldn't take a silent step themselves, they heard nothing behind them, but both were certain they were still being followed the entire way out. There was more in the message than just the recording, and I think it matters, so I want to share it with you the way they shared it with us.
They told us the feeling never fully let go. Even after the face was out of sight, even as the trees thinned and the real trail came back underfoot, the sense of being watched stayed with them the rest of the hike out. It only lifted, the husband wrote, when they were actually back at the car with the doors shut. They told us they argued for days about whether to send the footage at all. The wife was worried no one would believe them, that they would be laughed at, that strangers would tear apart a few shaky seconds of video and call them liars or fools. She has not wanted to go back to that section of forest since, not once. And they told us they very nearly deleted the whole thing, sat there with the recording open and a thumb over the trash icon because keeping it felt like keeping a door open to something they would rather close. In the end, they kept it. And eventually, they sent it to us. That is exactly the kind of thing this channel exists for. The accounts people are afraid to tell anyone else. So I'm going to ask you directly, if you have had an encounter, something you have never been able to explain, something you have maybe never even told the people closest to you, send it in. And if you were one of the rare few who managed to get something on camera, footage, a photo, anything at all, that is gold and we want to see it. We read everything that comes in. We protect anonymity whenever it's asked for, no questions, no exceptions. And the recordings you send are exactly how videos like this one get made in the first place. And I want to say something to the people who are sitting on a story right now, thumb hovering, talking themselves out of it. I know why you haven't told anyone. I know you are picturing the look on their faces. I know you have spent years quietly deciding it was a trick of the light, because that is so much easier to live with than the alternative. But every single one of these accounts, including the one you just watched, only exists because somebody finally decided that being disbelieved was worth less to them than the truth getting out. This couple almost deleted theirs. Think about how close we came to never seeing that face. Whatever you saw, it counts. Your account is a data point in something much bigger than you, and the only people who ever get to the bottom of anything are the ones who refuse to stay quiet. You are the reason this is possible. So if you've got a story, find the channel and tell me. I mean that. Now I want to do something that I think this footage forces us to do. I want to talk about the people who go into these same mountains and never come out. Because if there really is something in this corner of the country that can pace 2 grown adults through thick brush without making a sound, that can stand and watch and then vanish, then we have to at least ask an uncomfortable question about the cases the official record can only ever call lost. Let me tell you about 2 of them. Both real, both documented, both never solved. The first is a little boy named Dennis Martin. June of 1969, in the Great Smoky Mountains, the same range these hikers were walking. He was 6 years old, out with his father and grandfather and brother on a long-standing family camping trip, up along the high country near Spence Field, a meadow bisected by the Appalachian Trail. The boys had a plan. They were going to split up, circle around, and jump out to scare the adults. A harmless prank. Dennis stepped off to take his position, slipping behind a low screen of brush. It was a matter of seconds. When they looked for him to spring the surprise, he was simply gone. What followed was, to this day, the largest search operation in the history of the park. It started with the family, then rangers, then it swelled, day by day, into something almost unbelievable. Around 1,400 people at its peak. Volunteers, National Park Service personnel, even U.S. Army Green Berets who turned up to comb the backcountry. Over 1,000 helicopter sorties flown across some of the most rugged terrain in the eastern United States. And here is a detail that will sound familiar after everything I just told you about that couple. Within hours of Dennis vanishing, a heavy, violent storm rolled in over the search area. It flooded the streams, washed out the access, and destroyed any scent the dogs might have followed. The weather turned against the searchers almost as if on cue, a pattern that eerily shows up in case after case like this. They searched for over 2 weeks. They found nothing. No clothing, no shoe, no trace, no body. A healthy 6-year-old vanished behind a bush in good weather in the middle of his own family, and more than half a century later, not one shred of him has ever been recovered. There were strange footnotes, the kind these cases always seem to grow. A man miles away reported hearing a sickening scream that afternoon and seeing a rough, unkempt figure moving through the woods. Years later, a ginseng hunter claimed he had stumbled on a child's skeleton in a hollow some distance off, but said nothing at the time because he had been breaking the law to be there. And when the spot was finally searched, there was nothing. Every thread, when pulled, came apart in their hands. The second is a woman named Thelma Melton. Most people called her Polly. September of 1981, Deep Creek Trail on the North Carolina side of the Smokies. And here's what makes her case sit so strangely. She was not a novice. She had hiked that exact trail for nearly 20 years. She knew it cold. It was rated easy, a well-traveled, populated path. She was out with 2 friends on ground she had walked hundreds of times. On the way back, she picked up her pace. Power walked ahead of her companions in good spirits, one of them calling out that they wouldn't want to be in a foot race with her. She laughed, turned, and kept her quick pace. She crested a low hill on the gravel path and dropped out of sight on the far side. A minute, maybe 2, behind her, her friends came over that same hill. There was no Polly, not on the trail ahead, not resting on one of the benches where they expected to find her catching her breath, not back at the campground, gone in the span of time it takes to walk over a small rise. And when the bloodhounds were brought to the spot where her friends had last seen her, the dogs reportedly circled and would not take a scent. They howled and turned in confused loops at the exact point she had disappeared, as though she had walked over that hill and simply stopped existing. There were the same strange grace notes here too. Uncharacteristic behavior in the days before. A phone call she made that no one could account for, the only time in years anyone had known her to use that phone. A woman who, her family insisted, would never have walked off into the deep woods of her own free will, who was in fact afraid of the snakes that filled them. Now I'm going to be straight with you, the way I always try to be. These are real unsolved cases, and they have real conventional theories attached to them. The Smokies are vast and brutally rugged. There are sinkholes and bluffs and deep crevices and 100 ways for the terrain itself to take someone and never give them back. There is the possibility of foul play of a person, in Dennis's case especially. Smarter people than me have studied these cases for decades and landed nowhere certain. I'm not standing here telling you that a Sasquatch took Dennis Martin or took Polly Melton. I don't know what happened to them. Nobody does. That is the entire maddening point. But I will ask the question that the footage from this couple put in my head, and I will let you do with it whatever you want. We have account after account, going back generations, of something in these mountains that is huge and silent and so good at not being seen that grown adults argue about whether it exists at all. We have just heard from a couple who swear something paced them through dry brush without making a single sound. And in those same mountains, people vanish in seconds in fair weather on familiar ground, leaving the dogs turning in baffled circles and the searchers with nothing at all to hold.
I personally don't think it's crazy to wonder whether, even once, even in a single one of these cases, those two facts have ever quietly been the same fact. I am not saying they are, I am saying I would like to know that they aren't. A 6-year-old vanished behind a bush in front of his family, a woman crested a hill and was gone in under 2 minutes. Same mountains, never found.
Here's where the story takes a turn I did not expect when the couple's email first landed. Because while we were researching this, going through everything connected to that region, we came across other footage, 4 images said to come from the same stretch of mountains. And the moment I saw them next to the couple's recording, something jumped out at me that I want you to see too. The lighting is completely different. The couple filmed their creature in flat-screened forest light. This other set is shot in brighter, more open daylight, a different time of day, what looks like a different camera entirely, a different film stock. These are not frames from the same clip. These came from somewhere else. Now, I want to be careful here because the internet is a sewer of fake Bigfoot images. I treat all of it as guilty until proven interesting. But these 4 sat differently with me, and not because they are clearer or more dramatic. The opposite, actually. They are the ordinary kind of bad. The kind of bad that real footage of a real animal taken by a real startled person actually looks like. And when I lined them up against the couple's recording, I wasn't looking to connect them. I was just looking. And that is when I saw it. But that is not the part that stopped me. This is. The face is not the same. Look at them side by side and it is right there. Different bone structure, a different brow, a different overall cast to the features. The creature in the couple's footage and the creature in these 4 images do not look like the same individual. They look like 2 different beings of possibly the same kind. And if that is true, then think about what it means. We are not talking about an animal. One lone thing haunting one patch of woods. We are talking about more than one of them. We are talking about a population, which when you sit with it is the only way any of this could ever make sense. Because here is a problem that has nagged at researchers forever. For a creature to persist, undetected, for as long as these have been reported, across this much territory, there cannot be just one. A single animal lives, ages and dies, and the story dies with it. For the reports to keep coming, decade after decade, generation after generation, there has to be a breeding population. There has to be many, enough to keep the line going in the deep folds of the country where almost nobody ever looks. And people hear that and say, well, that's impossible. You cannot hide a population of giant creatures in the modern United States. But I would gently push back on that. We routinely fail to find animals we know for a fact are out there. Whole species have hidden in plain sight. Mountain lions were declared gone from huge stretches of the east for decades, and then they started turning up on doorbell cameras. We find new large animals, real, flesh and blood, scientifically cataloged animals, more often than people realize, and we usually find them in exactly this kind of place: remote, forested, folded. The eastern mountains alone hold millions of acres where a person could walk for days and never cross a road. You do not need a hidden world to lose something in country like that. You just need country like that, and we have it. So the idea of two different individuals photographed in the same range is not a complication to explain away. It is, if anything, the single most important thing in this whole video. Because one creature is a ghost story, two creatures is a species. And there are few ways to read two different faces from the same mountains. Maybe they are a family, a clan group, and we know from countless reports that these things are described traveling together, more than one at a time, adults and smaller ones moving in loose groups. We have talked on this channel before about sightings of groups rather than loners and how that detail keeps surfacing in the most credible accounts. Maybe it is regional variation, the simple fact that individuals in a population look different from one another, the way no two human faces are alike, the way you could pick your own brother out of a crowd of 1,000 people. Or maybe it is exactly what you would expect if you finally accept the premise that there are enough of them out there for you to film two in the same range, in the same season, and have them be complete strangers to one another. And that brings us to the strangest contrast in this entire story. The two recordings don't just show two different faces, they show two completely opposite reactions to being seen. The couple's creature stood its ground. It held the stare. It did not flinch. It did not flee. It watched them with that unblinking, predatory patience until they removed themselves from the situation. That is the posture of something that is not afraid of you, something in control. The creature in the four images is doing the opposite. In those frames, it appears to be moving, low and fast, possibly caught in the act of fleeing. The body language of something that has just realized it has been spotted and wants, more than anything, to be gone. To break contact, the posture of something that wants no part of you at all. So why? Why would two creatures of the same kind in the same mountains react in such totally different ways to the same situation, a human catching sight of them? And the more I think about it, the more I believe the answer is the most human answer there is. They're individuals. Think about temperament. Put any intelligent animal in the same situation 100 times and you will not get the same response 100 times because intelligent animals have personalities. Some are bold, some are timid, some are curious to the point of recklessness, and some want nothing but distance. Think about age and role. A big, dominant, mature adult, secure in its size and its territory, has every reason to stand and stare down two soft, slow humans who wandered into its woods. A younger one, or a more cautious one, has every reason to run the instant it is seen. And here's the idea I keep circling back to, the one that I think is the real heart of this. These are supposed to be a lost branch of the human family tree. A relic cousin, something close to us, walking upright, watching with forward-facing eyes, intelligent and aware. Well, if that is even partly true, then of course they would differ from one another as much as we do. because we are not one thing. Drop a stranger into your path in a dark wood, and you will get 1,000 different reactions across 1,000 different people. Some would freeze and stare, some would flee, some would approach, some would threaten. We are bold and timid and curious and hostile and gentle, all of us in every possible combination, because we are individuals with inner lives. And if these creatures really are our distant kin, then the most natural thing in the world would be for one of them to hold its ground like a king and another to bolt like a frightened child. And there's a deeper layer to this that I find almost beautiful in an unsettling way. The thing we use more than any other to decide whether something has a mind like ours is exactly this: unpredictability, personality. A rock reacts the same way every time you push it. A simple animal runs a fairly fixed set of programs. But the closer a creature gets to us, the more it surprises us, because the more it is running on something like choice. We recognize kin not by how alike we look, but by how unalike we behave, by the sheer ungovernable variety of it. A troop of chimpanzees is full of distinct personalities, the bully and the diplomat and the schemer and the gentle one, and we recognize them as near people precisely because of that. So if you showed me 100 of these encounters and every single creature reacted in the exact same way, I would actually be more suspicious, not less. The variety is the fingerprint of a mind.
So I personally lean towards this. What we are seeing across these two pieces of footage is not a contradiction. It is not evidence that one of them must be a fake because they don't behave the same. It is personality. And personality is precisely what you'd expect from something this close to us. The inconsistency isn't a problem. The inconsistency might be the best evidence we have that there is a real, thinking, deciding mind behind those eyes. If they really are a lost branch of us, of humans, then of course one would stand its ground and perhaps another one would run. We do not all react the same, so why would they?
I want to walk through these recordings honestly, frame by frame, and I'm going to hold myself to a strict rule while I do it. I will tell you what is actually visible. I will not invent detail that isn't there to make it scarier than it is. The truth is unsettling enough. Start with the couple's footage, the single clearest frame from it. What you can actually see is a dark, hair-covered face, set low between two tree trunks, partly obscured by foliage in the foreground. The brow reads heavy, the face is turned toward the camera, the eyes catch the light. And that is honestly about as far as I will go, because the shot is taken from distance and zoomed in hard, which means the detail breaks down exactly where you most want it to hold. I'm not going to describe an expression I cannot see, or for texture the pixels don't support, or a movement that isn't in the frame. And here's the honest truth about that. A single still pulled from a few shaking seconds of distant phone video is exactly as ambiguous as it looks. You can see enough to know something is there, and not enough to prove what. That ambiguity is frustrating, but it is also, if you think about it, exactly what real footage of a real, elusive animal taken by a terrified person would look like. The clean, perfect, well-lit shot is the one I trust the least. Now the other set, the 4 images from elsewhere in the region. The first of them is the clearest. In it, you can see a dark figure standing behind the screen of a conifer, the head and face turned out toward the camera in flatter, brighter daylight. The features read differently from the couple's creature, and that is the whole reason these images are in this video. The remaining frames are motion frames, and they are blurred the way things are blurred when either the subject or the camera is moving fast. In them you can make out a dark form, low and turning amid heavy green foliage. And in the fullest of them, a dark, bulky, upright shape beside a large tree trunk caught mid-movement, in a posture that is consistent with something moving away, fleeing if the people who captured it are right. So what can I actually say with my hand on my heart? I can say the two faces do not match. I am confident in that. I can say the lighting and the film stock are different, that these come from different moments, different cameras, maybe different years. What I cannot tell you is what either one of them is. I won't, because I don't know. And the second I start pretending I do, I have stopped being honest with you, and the honesty is the only thing that makes this channel worth your time. I know that is not the satisfying answer. I know some of you want me to freeze the frame, draw the red circles, and declare case closed. This is a Sasquatch. Here is the proof. But I have watched too many people in this field do exactly that. Take an ambiguous smudge and announce certainty, and every time they do it, they spend the credibility of everyone who is actually trying to look at this carefully. I would rather hand you a real question than a fake answer. A real question you can keep. A fake answer falls apart the moment someone pokes it. And maybe that is the most unsettling thing of all. 2 recordings, 2 different cameras, 2 different days, 2 different faces, and both of them independently with no apparent connection to each other show the same impossible things standing in the same old mountains. You can call one a hoax, you can call one a bear, but you have to do it twice, separately, with 2 different explanations, and at some point the simpler story is the one nobody wants to say out loud. If this couple were the only people ever to come back from these mountains with a story like this, it would be easy to set it aside. A bad fright, a misread shadow, a tale that grew in the retelling. But they are not the only ones, not even close. And the accounts that convince me most are not the famous ones. They are the quiet ones, the local ones, the people who had nothing to gain and a lot of reputation to lose. Western North Carolina is, by the numbers, one of the more active corners of the country for this. The mountains here have logged more than 100 documented sightings over the decades, scattered across dozens of counties, most of them never making it past a local newspaper or a researcher's case file. Take a man named Jeff Carpenter. He is not a showman or a hoaxer chasing clicks. He is a Jackson County native, a lifelong outdoorsman who learned to hunt and track and read the woods from his father. A man who spent decades running the county parks department before he retired. In other words, exactly the kind of credible, grounded, knows the difference between a bear and a bush witness you would want. Back in 2008, Carpenter heard something in the woods at 2 a.m. 2 enormous howls, sounds he said matched nothing he knew, nothing wild and nothing domestic. In the years that followed, he kept finding things, trees twisted in ways no wind does, tracks, enough that this skeptical, practical mountain man eventually became an official field investigator, documenting other people's encounters across these same hills. He went in a skeptic. The woods changed his mind, and that is the texture of it out here. It is not one viral clip. It is a long, low, steady hum of reports going back generations from hunters and campers and people sitting on their own back porches at dusk. Families who found enormous footprints around their tents in the morning. People who heard the howls roll down off the ridges at night and never forgot them. People who saw something cross a logging road in their headlights, upright, far too tall, gone before their brain could finish arguing with their eyes. Most of them never tell a soul. They have jobs and neighbors and reputations, and they know exactly how it sounds. And the Cherokee, who knew these mountains long before any of us, had their own names and their own stories for things in the deep woods, hairy and man-shaped, and best left alone. You can decide for yourself what that means. But I find it hard to wave away the fact that the people who lived most intimately with this landscape for thousands of years did not treat the idea of a large, hidden, man-like creature in the high forest as a joke. They treated it as a fact of the terrain, the way you would treat a river or a bear. Which is why when an ordinary hiking couple sends me a few seconds of a face in the trees and a recording of a frightened woman's voice, I don't laugh, because I know they are not an outlier. They are the newest entry in a record that this part of the country has been quietly keeping for a very, very long time. A record written mostly by people who had every reason to stay quiet and told the truth anyway. So where does that leave us? We have a couple who took the route they never take and walked into a silence that the forest doesn't make on its own. We have a face in the trees that watch them without blinking and a woman's voice asking, please, to leave. We have a walk back through dry brush pursued by something that made no sound at all. We have two real children of these mountains, a little boy and an experienced woman, who stepped out of sight on easy ground and were never found. And we have a second face, a second creature in the same range that ran instead of stared. 2 recordings, 2 reactions, 1 mountain range, old beyond reckoning, that has been keeping its secrets longer than we have been walking its trails. I am going to keep pulling on this thread, by the way. There is a whole region I have been wanting to take you into, the Ozarks, where the reports have their own strange flavor, and that one is coming. So keep an eye out. But for tonight, I want to leave you where this couple left us, unsure. Because maybe they saw a bear standing oddly in bad light, and fear did the rest. Maybe those 4 images are someone's clever hoax. That is possible, and I would never tell you it isn't. Or maybe in the quietest fold of these ancient hills, in the seams of the map where almost no one ever goes, there is something that learned a long time ago how to move without a sound. Something that has watched the trails and the people on them far longer than we have known to look back. And only rarely, only when it decides to, does it let one of us catch its face between the trees. Think about what that would actually mean. Not the monster movie version, the quiet version. It would mean that the feeling you have had on some lonely trail, that prickle at the back of the neck that you laughed off and blamed on too many stories, was sometimes right. It would mean the woods have never been as empty as they look. It would mean that being alone in the forest and feeling watched in the forest were, on certain days, in certain places, the same thing. And you simply chose the comfortable explanation because the other one was unlivable. The rest of the time, you would never even know it was there. And honestly, that is the part I can't shake. Not the times somebody got it on camera, the times nobody did. The thousands of hours these things must spend if they are real, standing just inside the tree line, watching us pass and deciding over and over not to be seen. This couple got a few seconds out of however long it had been standing there. That is not the exception that proves nothing. That is the one crack of light under a very, very long door.
So next time the birds go quiet around you and the woods hold their breath and you get that feeling, do me a favor, do not run. Just look at the tree line, really look, and ask yourself how sure you really are that nothing else is looking back at you. I'm Alex, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.